So I found out why I was meant to go home. In my last video here, I kind of told my story of following my intuition and how things, when I started to say yes to my intuition and follow it to a T, how my life got really honed in and a lot smaller to the point where I was only getting information weeks at a time of what to do next. And now I'm only getting information like a day at a time, which is all that I can handle right now, to be honest. And I was really hesitant and not particularly wanting to record this video because what happened when I came home is very raw and is very close as in time. But it has brought up something in me that I have always felt there is a lack of information and just lack of real conversation about. And that is death. So, probably from the title of this video, you understood that something was going to be talked about or about death. And the reason why I was told to go home was my dad ended up passing away. About a week and a half ago. So bear with me because I'm still, obviously, still processing and even that. And the reason I think my spirit guides are like, talk about it. And I'm like, no, this is really raw. Like, I'm going to be blubbering and crying and like this is it's too soon. I need to process my grief and not have to talk to anyone about it. And that's how I process things. That's how I processed the passing of my mom 5 years ago. I had to be by myself. And I had to, I was in my room essentially, and I played on my phone this little stupid game that passed the time and got my mind off of it because it was so devastating. And I watched a bunch of TV shows, binge watched that, and just because I didn't know how to process grief, and I didn't know what I know now about death and what happens after death and where spirit goes. And there was so many unknowns, and all I knew or understood in those moments after my mom passed was that the only understanding of death was going to heaven, or if you were a bad person, you went to hell. Because I grew up in a traditional home, a Christian home, where that was what was taught, and that's what was basically told that will happen after we die. And that concept of heaven and hell I never quite wrapped my head around it. I knew heaven was a good place and hell was a bad place. You didn't want to go to hell. And all the things that wrapped up in that whole concept of sin and Jesus and all of that. So when my mom passed away and transitioned, I was already on kind of this spiritual path of discovering something else besides that way and understanding something else besides that. But I didn't quite know what that was. So I became very curious in that, and I started looking at like what happens after you die. I started watching a lot of like documentaries about ghosts and mediumship and trying to understand like what happens, because I was just like, I know my mom's okay, but I want to know my mom's okay. Like, and I think that when she passed, there was things that happened that allowed me to kind of unlock this part of my gifts that were previously kind of hidden from me until that point in time. And one was like the night before she passed, I could see her spirit. I couldn't quite describe it. It looked like a galaxy. And it was kind of just hovering, because she was in this bed and I was kind of on the floor sleeping next to her. And it just looked like this galaxy, this sparkly galaxy that was like hovering above me and then above her. And it was all these beautiful colors, and then it just kind of went into her, and that's what I experienced. And so, and later, like figuring and hearing all these stories and all the things that I started to kind of discover as I was looking more into death, I was finding like I was understanding that was her spirit, like just kind of hovering above her body. And then the next day she transitioned that morning. And I knew it was a very interesting process, because I knew I was sleeping and or kind of sleeping as much as I could, and my brother's dog, who I'm super attached to, Mushu is his name, he's a little Shih Tzu, he was sleeping with his mom was here. My sister-in-law was sleeping in my room, and I was sleeping in the room with my mom. And he was sleeping with my sister-in-law, and he came to me that morning and was whining, which was not his norm. That he never whines. And he jumped up on the bed and just kind of like got in my face, like on my chest, and just got in my face, and then just kind of settled, and then eventually settled near my feet. And so I was like, well, that's interesting, I remember thinking. And then I woke up, and I just had this knowing that today's the day. And I remember like walking past my bedroom where my sister-in-law was staying, and she heard me walk past a couple times because I was going out to the kitchen. And she's like, is everything okay, Katie? I was like, today's the day. Like, it's starting. The passing is starting. And so it was a very like weird way of like kind of just understanding that my mom was transitioning. And after she transitioned, there was several things that I just kind of felt like in a daze and confusion. And I'm telling this story leading up to basically my dad passing last week. Because there's a timeline that needs to, I guess, be understood. And I didn't quite understand what I was supposed to be talking about today, but I knew that I was supposed to be talking about death. And so after my mom passed, I remember just oddly coming into my room, sitting in this chair, and just kind of like falling asleep, kind of, but very like light sleep, but being very at peace. My family was still here, and I remember like a couple hours later, I walked out, and they were outside and chatting, and I just remember being very at peace. And then everyone went home, and my brother and sister-in-law let Mushu stay for one more night. And so he stayed. And the first night, after my mom passed away, I was sleeping, which was crazy to me, because I thought for sure I wouldn't have a good night's sleep, but I was sleeping, and like in the middle of the night, out of like a dead sleep, I get woken up by this touch. Like I felt this touch on my foot, and it felt like a hand. And so I like woke up, and I looked around the room, and there was no one there. And I was like, that was weird. And that happened 2 more nights in a row. So for 3 nights that happened, and all I could do is sense that that was my mom. Like that was absolutely my mom, just kind of like, because we had this thing that we'd always like kind of comfort ourselves, and like at night before we go to bed, and we just kind of rub our feet together, as kind of like this self-soothing type of thing. So there was some significance in why she touched my feet. And it's like also, like when someone gently wants to wake you up and doesn't want to startle you, it's kind of like that soft little, like, I'm going to touch their feet first and kind of just be gentle. And so it was just a very motherly thing to do. And I just had this knowing that that was her. And so after that, I just kind of dived deep into a lot of this like death and dying and unknown, like what happens afterwards. And this whole journey really started after my mom transitioned, and the learning and understanding. And I couldn't quite understand or couldn't quite grasp everything, but I just had this sense the whole time. My mom was on hospice, but I had the entire time I had this sense that I'm really equipped to handle the dying process. Because I just felt at peace, and I felt very like content. I wasn't worried or rushed or anxious or stressed. A lot of the time I was just very, very present. Of course, human like side of things obviously comes up, but I just remember the whole process just being very present. And of course, always feeling the emotions when they came, never suppressing. And that's a different topic for another day. But all that to say is, it has brought me to this point where almost 5 years later, I have healed a lot, and my dad and my relationship was an up and down one, a tumultuous one, and definitely was always a hard relationship between the both of us. Um, but we healed a lot. And that is probably another topic that we can talk about on another video. And when I was in Taos, trying to figure out what my next steps were, because things were not quite, they weren't gelling, they weren't coming to plan, things weren't really like working out the way that I thought they were going to work, or wanting them to work, manifesting them to work. Things just kept on getting pieced together. And then when I was in Taos and then double checking again when I went to Durango, I just kept on being told go home after my trip to Durango. Like, don't book any more pet stays. Don't do anything else. I had this one little thing that was an obligation or something I already committed to that was only a few days in Taos. So I went from Durango to Taos and did that. And then from Taos, I drove home. And I made it home by on Friday, the Friday before Father's Day. And so I got to spend this like solid 2 weeks with my dad. Forgive me. Doing like all the things he loved. He loved going to Costco. That was one of his like most favorite things, because he just had so many people that he connected to over these 5 years of after my mom passed. He built this community for himself, and with his, I was very proud of him, and I got to express that to him multiple times over this past year. And I got to spend this like really amazing moments with him, just being present, not having to worry about work. I have like I basically have one client right now that I'm working on, and it's very light work. But somehow, like, I really don't know how, but money is like, it's not coming in, but it's just like it's taking care of all of my needs. What I have that's coming in, that's very little, it's taking care of all my needs. And so I was able to like do this like very light work load, and then be very present with him in his last couple weeks. And it was so interesting because I've heard, I've taken a lot of classes about death and what happens after death. And just because it's something that we don't talk about as a community. Lots of times it's something that is more feared than something that can be not so scary, if that makes sense. There's the grief aspect of it, absolutely. There's the sadness and the understanding, like how to sit in your grief and in the pain of the loss. But I feel like this time with my dad, and him passing and him transitioning was so much more, dare I say, beautiful. And there was again, that knowing. I mean, it was a very like stressful situation. There's lots of paramedics and everything. Like there's all these things, and I can go into more detail in a later time. But there was just this, like, I was standing there and I remember asking my intuition, is he gonna make it? And it simply said no. And so there was like there was this very amazing sense of peace at that moment. And I was like, okay, he's not going to make it. So it was like, and then, like, of course, my brain switches to, like, okay, what? I need to call my brothers. I need to get this, and that done, whatever, right now. And he ended up passing away later that day in the hospital. But he actually did pass away here in the home first. And they resuscitated him and got him to the hospital, and then he passed. So I don't know. I think my guides just want me to start talking about death and dying. And I'm not quite sure where these conversations will go. But I think there is just this kind of sense of the collective needs to start understanding more about this unknown. And by me doing all of the work and the preparing, kind of, now that I look back on it, of understanding and doing research and taking mediumship classes and attending like these also ascending, but attending these one-day workshop things, I was able to gather the information and understanding to have this process with my dad and him transitioning go much more, I'm getting the word brighter, if that makes any sense at all. Like, it doesn't seem so dark this time, or so unknown, or so devastating. And it was really beautiful, because I was in the hospital, just sitting there. And I closed my eyes, and I just was given this like vision of him and I walking together to a gate. The gate had no like actual gate. It was more like probably a pillar, pillars with an archway. And it was just a beautiful vision of us walking together up to this gate. And we got to the gate, and on the other side I could see like everyone Everyone waiting for him. His brothers, his brother, his sisters, um, my dog Rocky from when I was little, my mom, of course, my grandparents, his mom and dad, um, just everyone was there. All his buddies that passed away that he knew in New Jersey. There was so many people there to greet him, and we got to the gate or the entrance. Forgive me. This is why I didn't want to talk about this right now. But we got to the entrance, and I said, Dad, I can't go with you. This is where I have to leave you. And we just hugged. He squeezed my hand. And he just had this huge smile on his face as he walked over to all the people that were waiting for him. All the beings that were waiting for him. And then kind of the vision just dissipated after that. And I definitely feel like that. I mean, I know that I got to walk my dad to the other side. Just short of it, obviously. I didn't walk to the other side with him. There was a definite feeling of knowing this is where we have to part ways. So I remember just being very present in that moment to allow that experience to come in and to be able to do that with my dad. And so I think, I say I think a lot, but I know that these experiences are what has been bringing me so much more peace. And I know I don't know everything about death and the dying process. But these two experiences and what have come from that with my parents and the understanding and the knowing that have come from that has given me a really unique perspective and a really unique understanding. And I know that it's all the work that I've done in that interim time of when my mom transitioned, not knowing anything, to when my dad transitioned, and how much I had learned in those 5 years, and also following my intuition and just my heart, and getting really connected to my guides and my spirit team. There's just been so much that has actually allowed this after of being here on earth and knowing that they're over on the other side. It's given the grief where I can just kind of be in the sadness but not be devastated, and not be so kind of pulled down by that darkness that can follow death and not knowing. There's still so much unknown, obviously, about death and what happens after. we go and we transition. And it was funny because that, so that, my dad allowing me to go with him and walk with him to the gate, and then him going, automatically allowed me to have this telepathic connection with him. My mom allowing me to see her spirit hover above our bodies and go through and go into her before she passed allowed me to communicate with my mom telepathically as well. So there's this connection that I have with both of my parents now, that I can communicate with them and understand a little bit more. And it sounds super like, whoa, great. I know. Because I spent like a good 3 years having conversations with my mom and questioning, like, is this really happening? So I think the ending note of this video that my guides are wanting me to portray, or to say, rather, and I'm kind of rolling my eyes because it sounds so cliche, but death is not the end. There is living beyond death. Our energy does not die. It can never die. It can never not exist. It is always there. And so they're encouraging me to if you have a loved one who has passed, and even if it's been years or if it just has been recent, my guides are saying to ask for a sign from them. Spirit really loves to send signs. And I'll tell you what my dad has sent. So when I got home from the hospital that night, I was walking back to the room where I'm staying, and my room, essentially, and there was a lizard that somehow had gotten in the house. I mean, we live in a canyon mountain area, so like lizards and creatures and critters are all over the place, and they always somehow get in the house. But so this little guy was like kind of, I think it was like a leopard lizard. He had little spots all over him, and he was right in front of, it was he or she, I'm not quite sure, to be honest. He was right in front of my door, just kind of chilling, sitting there. And so I picked him up and I told him, like, don't squirm. Like, I'm just going to put you outside. So I picked him up and I put him outside. And then as I was putting him outside, I saw a hawk, which is a sign from my mom. It was on the back of our house, and it like took off right when I saw it, and I did that like beautiful little dive with its wings, and so I was just like, thank you, Mom. And then I was walking back to go back inside, and in this little bucket that we have that my dad would always put the ashes from the fireplace in, there was a hawk feather that was just sitting there in the bucket. And so I picked it up. I actually have it right here. I picked it up and I have kept it. Hold on. So that was just a sign of just like my spirit guides, my mom, everyone's taking care of me at this time. And I would just made a mental kind of note of the lizard. It was just like my mom, dad, and I would always have these funny instances with lizards, and they would come in the house and get lost in rooms, and then weeks later we'd find them and let them outside. And so there's always these like little funny instances with lizards around our house. And I oddly enough had like a couple conversations to my dad about lizards when I was in Taos. I was just telling him, I was like, it's really weird, there's no lizards around here. I haven't seen any lizards. And we were talking about, well, maybe it's too cold and they haven't come out yet. And so it just had like these random conversations about lizards. And so that just kind of, again, it was just like, oh, that's interesting. So then that morning, I saw goldfinch, which is this beautiful, bright yellow bird here in Southern California and probably other places as well. But I also had this conversation like several times throughout my 2 weeks with my dad of him like, oh, Katie, look at the goldfinch. Like, look, there's goldfinch. And so it's just like, so there's these things that were happening that I was just like, oh, yeah, I think that's probably going to be my dad's bird, you know? And then there was this really cool instance where my dad kept on mentioning this bird that had this mohawk. And I thought it was this other bird that I had seen quite a bit around the house. That kind of it's like white and black. And he'd always just like, yeah, it's a black bird with a mohawk. And I was like, yeah, I know which one you're talking about, thinking it was this other bird. Well, it wasn't. And it was this really cool looking one that I've never seen before. Now, something that you have to know about my dad was he loved like cardinals. That was I'm pretty sure that was his sign with my mom and him, but he would never really probably talk about that aspect of it because he was a very devout Christian. But he just, every time he saw cardinal things, we don't have cardinals here in Southern California, but he'd see cardinals on like a movie or like my friend gave him this beautiful little cardinal remembrance thing after my mom passed, and he kept that close. And so it just, there was these little things with cardinals that he loved, which is a very something that a lot of people connect with when a loved one passes. And so he had this thing about cardinals. And so when I looked at this blackbird with the mohawk, I was just like, well, I have no idea what kind of bird this is. So I looked up like blackbird, Southern California, mohawk, and on Google, and saw the pictures. I was like, okay, that's it. So I clicked on one of the pictures, and what do you want to bet? It's called the Goth Cardinal because it's all black. And they are in the Mojave Desert, and then they come to Southern California like certain times of years to breed with their part. Like, I was just like, oh my gosh, of course it's a cardinal. It's a goth cardinal. So it's like our version of a cardinal, essentially, here in Southern California. And so it's just like, so these are the signs that kept popping up. And every morning I see hawks. I see, from my grandmother, hummingbirds. I've yet to see a roadrunner from my grandfather. That's his bird that I associate him with. Um, and then I keep on seeing goldfinches and this goth cardinal that comes every morning when I'm like outside having my coffee. So really cool instances, but you have to be like, one, you have to be open to receiving these things from spirit and from your loved ones. You can't be closed off, and even an open, curious heart is good. Question. You can question, and you can ask for different signs. You can ask for particular signs, or a very like unique to them sign. So, and then so the last little bit of this story is a week later, after it had been 1 week, this past Saturday, and I come home. I was just feeling funky all day, and I just was like, man. And I've talked about this before, but my medicine is going for walks, and I like being near the mountains, and I love pine trees. And so there's this neighborhood that is around here that has a ton of pine trees. And so I went for my walk and came back, and it was around the time that my dad had passed a week ago. And I walk in the door, and what is on the couch, right, when I'm like walking the door? It's the stinking lizard. I don't know how it got back in. I don't know if it was the same lizard. It was the same looking lizard. So who knows if it was the same exact one. But it was on the couch, just chilling there, sitting there, waiting for me to come home or walk in the door and see it. And so of course I was just like, all right, little guy, you gotta like hold still. I gotta get you. Like, you're not gonna find you'll find food, but you're not gonna find a ton out in the house. I need to put you back outside. And so I caught it, and I put it back outside. But it was so, I was just like, I just had to giggle because it was something that obviously, like, it's just like you have to pay attention to the little things, because oftentimes spirit does not move in big boisterous ways of like, look at me, see me, this is what I'm sending you. Like, it's very subtle things, it's little things, and it's often, very, very often connected with nature. Because they're creatures of this earth, are just, a lot of them are messengers from spirit. And so it's a amazing way that they can connect with us on this realm, on this earth plane. And so I just encourage you, as difficult as the death process and the aftermath and the grieving is, I encourage you to just seek out the answers that you're looking for. Ask the questions. Be curious about life and death. And most of all, Spirit just really wants you to understand and know that we don't have to be fearful of dying. And we don't have to be fearful of the pain either. Because there's a moment when our spirit, our soul, I'm giggling because there's this chime that I was given after my mom passed. And whenever I think of something and whatever is kind of truth, it always tinks. I don't know if you can hear it. But when we pass, when we die, our soul steps out of our physical being. And so the pain that we see the body going through, because this was a huge thing that I had to grasp and understand about my mom's transition and now with my dad transitioning, and seeing like the physical body in pain and what we associate with pain and our physicalness can be really, really difficult to live with afterwards. And not feel, there's like this sense of weird guilt that comes with after death. And I can get into that another time. But not a lot of people talk about that either. And it's a very strange way that our human selves processes death and dying. It's kind of not fair, essentially. It's not very comforting way. And I think a lot of it has to do with like just seeing your loved one in pain, especially if you were there at the passing, which I was for both of my parents as they took their last breath. And having gone through what I went through with my mom and all the learning and the understanding that I did these past 5 years really allowed me to see that like the body is just shutting down. And they're not feeling any pain, though it may look like it is. Their soul is already left. They may be outside, just hovering or kind of assessing the situation or trying to figure out what's going on. Sometimes, like if it's a sudden, it can be a little confusion on their part. And so I think it's just like I say that to just, for whatever reason, whoever needs to hear that, it's like, just know that their soul was gone. They were not feeling that physical pain. And I don't know if that will bring you any sort of comfort. Or at least just kind of help you begin that process of letting go. Letting go of that kind of the guilt associated with seeing a loved one pass that had pain and you couldn't do anything about it. You couldn't relieve that pain because it was just part of the body physically letting go. But for me, knowing what I know now, it allowed me to work through that guilt a little bit and transmute it and kind of just get it worked out more quickly this time than it was with my mom, because I was like, with my mom, I was her caretaker for the 9 months that after she was diagnosed. And so it took me a very long time to understand and let go and release the guilt that I felt by not being able to save her And it was not my job to save her. It was not my part of my path to do that. And I think that's what really allowed me to, or helped me this time around with my dad, being able to know that that is something that's going to come up, and to be like, kind of like, I don't believe that. I don't believe what my brain is telling me, in the sense that I should be guilty or feel guilty about my loved one feeling pain right now, or feeling like I should have done more to save them. So I've been able to just kind of talk myself through that, walk myself through that more gently and with more kindness and compassion this time, knowing all that I know. And I think that's one of the main things that Spirit just wants people to know, that you did everything that you possibly could. You did the very best that you possibly could. And try not to stay in that space of feeling guilt. It's a very weird way that your brain brings up things and connects them to things. And look, I could definitely go down the rabbit hole of like, I wasn't here for a year. I wasn't taking care of my dad. I wasn't the one that was like watching out for him. Like, if I was here, I maybe could have gone that way, or could have gone that way, done that, or whatever. Like, I could definitely have gone down that path. But what I know and understand is that I have been following my intuition to a T this whole past year. And it has led me to this point in time, coming back, circling back around, coming back home, when it told me to come home, spending those precious last 2 weeks with my dad, doing all the things he loved, many of the things that he loved. And now being here in this moment, very much at a crossroads of not knowing what to do next, but knowing that my intuition, from the very simple fact that it told me to come home, go home, and I listened, and then this happened soon after, I got to spend those precious moments with my dad. That if I would have been a little more stubborn, or pushed through, or said, I want to stay where I'm at because I know that I'm supposed to be here in Taos, I would have missed that. But there's a weird, strange, like, correlation or connection to it as well, because I also feel like my dad was waiting for me to come home. For a very long time, I felt like my dad was ready, and he was just kind of biding his time here. He missed my mom an incredible amount. And like I said, I was so incredibly proud of him for how he built his life beyond my mom and beyond her passing. But he missed her so much. And I think that also, to me, has brought a lot of comfort, knowing I can talk to my mom now, and I can talk to my dad, and they're together, and they are just having a ball up there. Like, I've already been given like visions of parties that they've been going to. My dad told me today that they went to Ireland as their like reuniting honeymoon. I was like, all right, Dad, I want to hear anything else. So it's just like these moments that, sure, I can sound like a wackadoo, and you can say whatever you want, But it's just like these moments where I am absolutely like, I know within my heart, I know within my being, my soul, my spirit, that this is the truth. And so it's gotten to, I've gotten to this point where I just have this knowing, and I don't have to question it anymore. Where as when my mom transitioned, there was a lot of like questions and is this real or what is this not? And so it's like been this long journey of 5 years, and that whole journey of last year trusting my intuition that has got me to this place where I just feel very solid in knowing many things that a lot of people, or that were once unknown. Let's just say that. So I don't know where else to go with this. I think I've been talking for quite a long time now, almost an hour about this. And I don't even know if you're still here. But I have just been feeling more and more that I am supposed to share my story. And there will be little messages from Spirit here and there. But it's just, I don't know. I don't know why. I just feel like I need to start sharing these stories with you. And Spirit just keeps on nudging me to share my stories. And I'm just like, but Spirit, it's about me. Like this whole thing is supposed to be about you, about the people that I'm like supposed to be helping and lifting up and doing all the things for. It's not supposed to be about me. And I just keep on being told, like, your stories are healing. Your voice is healing. Tell your stories. And they're magical. And that's why I just feel like there's so much magic within them, too. And I think that is kind of where I guess it's for, all I'm getting is to bear witness to Spirit. And to magic. So, all right, my loves. Thank you for being here with me. Thank you for listening to this very difficult topic and this very difficult story. And it's not one to take lightly. And it's something that I just feel like we need to have more real conversations about death and dying, so we're not ourselves so fearful. Because I feel like that was one of the gifts my mom gave to me with her passing, was letting go of my fear of dying. Because for a very long time I was afraid to die. I was afraid of death. And this whole journey has allowed me so much more understanding and knowing that there is something beyond, and that we just don't die. There is life beyond death, as cliche as that sounds. But it's not something that we talk about. Or if we do talk about it, it's very in a religious way. And this has kind of just taken out all of the religion and all of the other stuff that can convolute this topic and this concept and whatever, however you want to look at death. And so I just kind of, I've been wanting to, or my intention with these conversations is just to have real conversations and ask questions. So if you have questions, I may not know all the answers. I probably don't, to be honest. But I may know some, or I may be able to point you into directions and into where to look and who to contact. So I think that's where it's just a starting point. This is just a starting point. All right, I'm going to stop talking. Thank you so much for being here with me and holding this space with me. I am so incredibly grateful for each and every one of you who come across this video. I know this was a hard topic and a hard conversation. So thank you for bearing witness. Thank you.